My name is Carmen Ortega 32, and the morning everything broke began with the kind of gentle quiet that usually made me feel safe. The Saturday sun fell across our wooden floor in a warm, slow-moving striped dust, floating lazily in the light as if the world itself hadn't decided yet whether to fully wake up. The apartment smelled like the dark roast I'd brewed for us, rich and familiar. It should have been an easy morning. It felt like one right up until it didn't. I sat curled into the corner of our couch, a blanket over my legs, scrolling through the news on my phone. No rush, no plans, just the slow, unhurried softness of a weekend together. I thought Caleb was in the bedroom taking his time choosing sweatpants, or debating between two different worn-out hoodies he always stole from the dryer. But I kept hearing movement with an odd rhythm. Closet doors, a drawer sliding open, the hiss of cologne. Too precise, too purposeful. When he finally stepped into view near the entry mirror, something inside me pressed pause. Caleb wasn't dressed for a lazy Saturday. He wasn't even dressed for brunch with friends. He wore a fitted charcoal button-down I'd only seen him wear on important days at work, sleeves rolled neatly at the forearms. His hair was styled just enough to look effortless, and the cologne, God, the cologne, was the expensive one he saved for events. It wasn't the outfit that set off the warning bell. It was the expression, focused, detached, the kind of face you'd wear if you were rehearsing something. "You look sharp," I said, setting my phone aside, forcing my voice into something light. "Big plans." He didn't look away from the mirror, just adjusted his collar with a slow, assessing drag of his fingers. "Just getting coffee." The answer landed incorrectly like a puzzle piece that didn't quite fit. Caleb never dressed like this for coffee. He never dressed like this unless it mattered. With who I asked. He finally turned, but only partially, eyes flicking to his phone as a notification lit the screen. His thumbs typed something quick and certain. A small smile touched the corner of his mouth so faint it could have been imagined, but it wasn't imagined. "Elena," he said simply. My blood cooled. His ex-girlfriend. The one who'd dumped him years ago for someone flashier. The one he'd once admitted still made him feel unfinished in a way he hated. The one who'd always felt like a ghost hovering just behind us in the early days of our relationship. "Elena," I repeated, my tone steady, but my pulse clicking upward. "Okay, so we're meeting her." That was the moment. That was where he should have said, "Yeah, it's just coffee. Don't worry. Come with me." Or even, "Can we talk about this?" Instead, he looked straight at me, eyes cool and unreadable, and delivered the line with the kind of precision that ensures it wounds exactly where intended. "You're not invited." The apartment seemed to exhale all at once, air thinning around me. For a second, I didn't move, didn't blink. The words lifted, turned slowly, and then cut deep. "You're not invited." It wasn't a casual slip or a poorly chosen phrase. It was a boundary, a declaration, a quiet surgical removal of me from a part of his life he still reserved for her. My voice came out soft but remarkably even. "Why?" He slid his phone into his pocket, grabbed his watch, and fastened it with a crisp click. "It'll just be a quick catch-up. Nothing to overthink. Just be cool." Be cool, meaning don't react, don't question, don't exist in this part of his life. I stared at him, at the man I had spent 3 years building something with, and I tried to understand how he'd become a stranger in the span of 10 seconds. The warning bell in my mind wasn't ringing anymore. It was humming low, steady, unmistakable. I felt the crinkled paper in the pocket of my jeans, the one I'd slid there last night before bed. A receipt. From the jeweler. I had picked up the custom engagement ring yesterday, a flawless solitaire with a pave band designed specifically for his taste. I'd planned to propose tonight. I'd already bought ingredients for his favorite dinner. I'd rehearsed what I wanted to say. We were supposed to move forward, but he was moving backward toward someone else. He grabbed his keys from the counter and walked toward the door. Not once did he check if I was okay. Not once did he hesitate. He just looked at me with a bland, almost bored indifference. "I'll be back in a few hours," he said. And the version of me who loved him wanted to drown in questions. Did I do something wrong? Was I boring? Did some part of him always belong to her? Was I temporary? But the version of me who had grown quietly, steadily, heard something different. A truth. If he could look at me like that, if he could choose her over me so effortlessly, if he could exclude me from his world with a single sentence, then he wasn't the man I believed he was. I let all of that whirl inside me, then I froze it. When I finally spoke, my voice was so calm it shocked even me. "Understood." Caleb blinked, as if he'd been preparing for an argument and didn't know what to do without one. For a split second, there was disappointment in his eyes, real disappointment that I wasn't performing the outrage he'd predicted. He opened the door. The soft click of it shutting behind him was the loudest sound I had ever heard. I sat still for a long moment in the sunlit quiet, surrounded by a life I had been ready to build with him. My chest felt hollow, scraped clean, but my mind had never been clearer. I pulled the ring receipt from my pocket, smoothed the creases with my thumb, and placed it on the coffee table, like an obituary for a future that had just died. Then I stood. The time for confusion was over. I walked to the bedroom, pulled out my suitcase, and set it on the bed. It was time to leave. Tomorrow I would cancel the ring. Tonight I would pack the woman I still was. The first thing I packed was my silence. Not the fragile, stunned silence from earlier that morning, but a colder, sharper kind that had purpose. The kind that didn't tremble. The kind that didn't ask questions it already knew the answers to. The kind that moved. I opened the suitcase on the bed and began with the essentials: jeans, sweaters, workout clothes, the soft blue scarf. My mother knitted me years ago. Everything folded with intention. Nothing frantic, nothing messy. If anyone had walked in, they might have mistaken me for someone preparing for a weekend trip, not someone quietly dismantling an entire life. I didn't look at the framed photos of us on the dresser. I didn't touch the stack of movie stubs we'd saved. I didn't let my eyes linger on the gifts he'd given me. Every object suddenly felt like it belonged to a different timeline, a version of myself I no longer recognized. By the time I zipped up the suitcase, the sun had drifted to the other side of the room. The shadow on the floor was longer now, cutting across the carpet like a marker dividing before and after. My phone buzzed once, a calendar reminder popping up innocently. Pick up ingredients for Caleb's favorite dinner, 5:00 p.m. I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then I slid the phone into my pocket and walked to the kitchen, where the ring receipt sat in the center of the table like a verdict waiting to be executed. The jeweler's number was printed at the top, elegant and embossed. I dialed it. My voice, when the receptionist answered, sounded almost disturbingly steady. "Hi," I said. "My name is Carmen Ortega. I have a custom engagement ring scheduled for pickup today. I need to cancel the order and refund my deposit." A pause on the other end. Paper noises. The faint clicking of a keyboard. "Oh," the woman finally said, tone softening with instinctive empathy. I'm so sorry to hear that, Ms. Ortega. Is everything okay?" "The engagement isn't happening anymore," I replied. No elaboration, no quiver in the throat, just fact. "Yes, I understand. We can process the refund immediately. It may take a few business days to reappear on your card." "That's fine," I said. When the transaction was confirmed, I thanked her, hung up, and exhaled. Not shakily, not sadly, just letting my chest return to its natural shape. I left the receipt on the table. Not hidden, not thrown away. I wanted Caleb to see it when he came home. I wanted him to see exactly when the break had happened. He would understand the timeline. He wasn't stupid. He would realize I had ended the engagement quietly, cleanly, at the exact moment he told me I wasn't invited into his life. It wasn't spite, it was documentation. I packed the rest of my belongings into a couple of moving boxes, the few I still had from my last apartment. My books, my journal, my laptop, the plants I refused to abandon. I took nothing he might claim as ours. No shared blankets, no kitchenware, no artwork chosen together. Just myself extracted with surgical precision. I carried the boxes to my car in 2 trips, the hallway dim and cool, the air outside smelling faintly of rain. Each lift, each step felt like clearing debris after a storm, necessary, methodical cleansing. When I returned for the final sweep of the bedroom, the apartment looked unfamiliar. Too wide, too echoing, too emptied of something essential. It already belonged to him now, and strangely that realization brought a wave of relief. I checked into a nearby hotel, an unremarkable beige building with the faint chemical scent of all chain lodgings. But it felt like sanctuary, a place with no memories, no ghosts, no shared artifacts. I showered, changed clothes, and lay on the bed, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, letting the sound of the air conditioner hum through the room. I didn't cry. Instead, I replayed the moment he told me I wasn't invited, studying it, filing it, sealing it away as evidence. Not of betrayal, but of truth. The truth of who he was. The truth of how he saw me. The truth of what he was capable of taking for granted. At some point, exhaustion took me under. When I woke, the light outside the curtains was dusky and cool evening creeping in. I felt different, as if something heavy had lifted from my chest during sleep. My suitcase sat in the corner, zipped and waiting, and I found myself staring at it with a strange sense of appreciation. I had saved myself, not by screaming, not by begging, not by demanding apologies, but by walking away before he ever thought I'd do it. Later that night, after I'd eaten a leftover granola bar from the bottom of my purse and watched half an episode of some forgettable crime show, my phone vibrated. A text. Unknown number. I didn't open it. I didn't need to yet. I just let the screen glow against the dark hotel room and then fade. Instead, I went downstairs, bought a bottle of water from the vending machine, and stepped outside into the cool night air. The parking lot was quiet, dotted with a handful of cars under the orange glow of street lamps. My car sat under one of them, boxes still inside, my pass neatly stacked behind the glass. I leaned against the door, letting the night chill sink into my skin. 10 minutes later, headlights turned into the lot. A silver sedan, Caleb's. He parked 3 spaces down. He didn't see me at first. He stepped out still wearing the same charcoal shirt from earlier, though now it looked rumpled, the sleeves uneven, the collar slightly askew. His steps weren't steady. He swayed not with drunkenness, but with something between arrogance and anxiety. He hummed something under his breath, his expression smug as if the afternoon had energized him. Then he looked up. He froze. There I was, leaning casually against my car, the back seat filled with boxes, my suitcase visible through the window. His smile evaporated, his brow furrowed confusion, blooming fast into dread. "Carmen!" His voice pitched upward. "What's with the boxes?" I didn't answer him. I didn't move. I didn't soften. Instead, I asked the question calmly. "How was coffee?" He blinked. Hard. The mundanity of the question collided with everything he was seeing. "It was good," he said weakly. "Why are you—" "We're done." 3 words. No heat, no tremor, just the truth. Something shattered across his face, first disbelief, then anger, then fear. He started talking fast, a brave man suddenly drowning. But all of that would come next. Right now, in the cooling air of the hotel parking lot, the moment stood suspended and clean. I wasn't leaving in reaction. I wasn't running away. I was choosing myself. The first 2 days after I ended things were quiet in a way that felt almost medicinal. The hotel room's stillness didn't feel oppressive. It felt earned, like I had been holding my breath for years without realizing it and finally let the air out. I spent the time on my laptop sorting through rental listings in parts of the city Caleb would never think to look in. I didn't tell my friends anything yet. I wanted the story to exist without outside interpretation or someone else's shock shaping how it felt. I wanted the truth to settle the way dust does, first in the light, then everywhere. On the 3rd morning, my phone buzzed. A text. Unknown number. But I already knew. Unknown Carmen. "This is crazy. Can we please talk? You're overreacting. It was just coffee. You're throwing away something real." I stared at the message in the same way a person watches a familiar scene in a movie already knowing the lines. Caleb's tone was predictable in its self-preservation. He hadn't said "I'm sorry." Not once. He was correcting my reaction, not his behavior. I deleted the message without replying. 2 hours later, another buzz. This time, a voicemail. I watched it appear in the notification bar and disappear into the inbox with the same emotional investment one gives to watching leaves fall onto a sidewalk. I pressed play. "Carmen. Hey, it's me. Please answer. Okay, look, I get it. You're mad. I was stupid. Elena was nothing. It didn't mean anything. She's already gone. She flew back home this morning. It was ego. I made a mistake. A huge one. Please, I'm alone in the apartment and it feels wrong. Please call me back." His voice cracked in the middle, but there was something about the crack that didn't feel like guilt. It felt like panic. Panic about being left. Panic about losing control of the narrative. Panic that the person he assumed would always be there suddenly wasn't. I saved the voicemail not because I wanted it, but because it belonged in the same mental file as the receipt on the table. Evidence, not of love, but of self-interest. Then I deleted the message. Late that night, I sat at the small desk in the hotel room. The lamp threw a soft yellow circle of light across the surface, illuminating the keyboard as I typed apartment applications. I felt peaceful, not euphoric, not triumphant, just peaceful. A quiet I had not experienced in years. Then the phone buzzed again. Another unknown number. The text preview was venom condensed into 2 lines. "Unknown fine. Be that way. You were always too weak for me anyway." I almost smiled. There he was. The real Caleb. The version that lurked beneath the charm and the careful tenderness. Anger was always the hidden layer beneath his wounded pride. It wasn't new, only newly directed where it couldn't touch me anymore. I blocked the number, and the silence that followed wasn't empty, it was clean. The next morning, I woke to sunlight filtering through the thin hotel curtains, turning the room a faint orange. For a few seconds, I lay there without moving, the softness of the moment settling over me like a blanket. It was the smallest thing, waking without dread, but it hit me harder than I expected. My peace lasted until 10:17 a.m. when the phone buzzed again. This time the caller ID showed a name I recognized. Tessa, Caleb's closest friend. The one who always encouraged his worst impulses under the guise of embracing his freedom. The one who had passive-aggressively joked that I was too stable or too loyal to be fun. The one who had once said, I swear with a laugh, that men needed options to appreciate what they have at home. I answered without hesitation, putting it on speaker as I reopened the apartment listing website. Carmen, she said, delivering my name like an accusation. It's Tessa. I know, I replied calmly. You need to talk to Caleb. No, I said simply. She scoffed so loudly I had to hold the phone slightly away from my ear. He's a mess, you know, a complete mess. He realizes he screwed up. He's really sorry. And honestly, if you loved him, you'd at least hear him out. I let the sentence hang in the air for a beat. And if he loved me, I said evenly, he wouldn't have told me I wasn't invited. Tessa sputtered clearly, not expecting a response grounded in facts instead of emotion. You're being cruel. He made one mistake. A real woman forgives. I stopped typing and straightened slightly. Tessa, I'm going to say this once. Caleb's emotional state is no longer my responsibility. Do not call me again. I ended the call, blocked her, and resumed searching for apartments. The quiet stretched through the day, a kind of reflective silence, the kind that lets you see everything clearly, the shape of the relationship, the compromises I had normalized, the red flags I had minimized. Not because I was foolish, but because I wanted to believe in a future that required me to ignore things that now felt glaring. Just after sunset, when the sky was a deep bruised blue fading into night, a final email arrived. Sender a name I didn't recognize, but the writing there was no mistaking who it belonged to. Subject, I get it now, Carmen. I opened it only to confirm what I already knew. The email was long, rambling, emotionally erratic. He explained that he went to the jeweler to see the ring and learned I had canceled it the same day he left for coffee. He wrote that he finally realized I wasn't reacting in anger, I was acting in certainty. He admitted that Elena had met him only to get another hit of nostalgia and validation, that she rejected him the moment he wasn't convenient, that she had vanished without a second thought. He said he understood now that he'd thrown away something real for something that never even existed. He said he realized I was the one who mattered. He said he knew he had destroyed everything. I read it once. Then I deleted it. Not in anger, in closure. Because in every sentence, I could feel the truth pulsing through the words. He wasn't sorry for what he had done. He was sorry that he had lost. And those are not the same thing. I closed the laptop, lay back on the bed, and let myself breathe in the soft hum of the air conditioner and the faint sounds of traffic outside the window. His unraveling was not my burden. His regret was not my responsibility. His consequences were not my consequence. For the first time in our entire relationship, I felt completely free. 2 months passed with a quiet steadiness that felt almost unreal compared to the turbulence that had come before it. Time didn't rush. It didn't drag. It simply moved one unobstructed day into the next, carving out a new life for me, like a river shaping a shoreline. My new apartment wasn't glamorous. It sat on the second floor of an old brick building with creaky stairwells and a faint smell of cedar drifting from somewhere in the hallway. But the sunlight in the mornings was warm and bright, and the place had space for my books, my plants, and most importantly, my peace. Every evening after work, I cooked simple meals, rearranged furniture, or listened to soft music while sitting on the balcony, watching people walk their dogs. The normalcy tasted sweet. Friends began inviting me out more. I didn't tell them the full story right away, not because I was hiding anything, but because I wanted to experience being myself again without anchoring every conversation to what had happened. Eventually, when I told them bits and pieces, they didn't erupt with outrage or pity. They just listened, nodded, and said variations of, "I'm glad you chose yourself." I was glad too. By the time 8 weeks had passed, I had stopped checking my blocked list. I had stopped wondering if Caleb tried to contact me again. I had stopped thinking about whether Elena had disappeared or come back. Their names didn't shake loose any emotion anymore, not grief, not anger, not nostalgia. They were simply irrelevant facts from a former life. One Friday night, my friends Lena and Noah dragged me out to a pub I'd never been to before the Grizzly Bear. It was the kind of place with dim wooden walls, dartboards on the far side, and a jukebox that played everything from 90s rock to country ballads with equal sincerity. The air was thick with the smell of fried wings and beer, and the tables were crowded with people leaning over conversations that competed with the clatter of darts hitting the board. I slid into a booth next to Noah, who was already halfway through a pint, and let the noise wash over me. It was a different world from the quiet of my apartment, but it felt good, warm, chaotic, alive. At one point, I leaned back in the booth, my arms stretching across the worn leather upholstery, and listened to Noah complain about a disastrous tennis lesson he'd taken earlier that week. Lena nearly spit out her drink, laughing at his dramatic reenactment. I laughed too, really laughed in a way I hadn't in months. I didn't realize how natural it felt until I caught myself smiling quietly between sentences. That was my first mistake. My second was looking toward the door. He walked in with the uncertain, searching step of someone trying to blend in while hoping desperately not to be ignored. Caleb. The moment I saw him, it felt like the air thickened, but not from emotion. More like noticing a window someone forgot to close. He looked different. Not in the poetic heartbreak way movies love to portray. Just thinner. His hair a little unkempt, his clothes hanging slightly loose at the shoulders. His face carried exhaustion, not the kind that sleep cures, but the kind built from restless nights staring at ceilings that echo with what-ifs. Behind him stood Tessa, equally changed. Less smug, more brittle. They paused near the doorway, scanning the room, probably looking for an empty table. And then his eyes caught mine. Hope detonated across his face so quickly it was almost painful to watch. I turned away and focused on the condensation sliding down my pint glass. "Everything okay?" Noah asked quietly beside me. "Yep," I answered, and I meant it. But the shadow approached anyway. I felt the presence before I saw it. A faint shift in the air, a stillness that cut through the background noise. I lifted my gaze and found Caleb standing at the side of our booth, hands clenched so tightly his knuckles had gone white, his breathing uneven, his attempt at composure weak at best. "Carmen." His voice cracked on the second syllable. I offered a polite nod, the same one I might give to a passing coworker. "Caleb, you look good." His tone tried for casual, but landed somewhere between pleading and regret. "Thank you," I said, taking a sip of my drink. He swallowed, clearly thrown by the lack of drama. "Can we talk?" "There's nothing to talk about." His jaw tightened. The glance he cast toward the booth behind us was quick, but telling he didn't want witnesses. He didn't want anyone else watching the unraveling he had hoped to reverse. But this time, he had no control over the stage. "I just want to explain," he said. "I don't need an explanation." My voice stayed soft, steady, unthreatened. "I understood everything that mattered the moment you told me I wasn't invited." He flinched, like I'd struck him, even though my tone hadn't risen a single notch. "Carmen, I made the biggest mistake of my life," he said, words tumbling out. "Elena. She wasn't." He stopped, ran a hand through his hair, trying to gather himself. "She used me. She only wanted to see if she still had power over me. When I told her no, she just left. No explanation, no goodbye." His voice wavered, and the whole time I kept thinking, God, what did I do? Why did I throw away what we had? He waited. He wanted the silence to pull me closer. I let it stretch without offering him a single lifeline. He tried again, voice cracking, "I miss you. I miss us." I set my glass down gently, placing it on the coaster with the softest click. Then I looked at him, really looked, and what I felt was nothing. Not a void, not a wound, just neutrality. He stood 3 feet away from me and felt as distant as a stranger at a crosswalk. "What we had," I said calmly, "was only real on my side, not yours." His breath hitched. "That's not true." "It is," I said. "Because if it were real for you, you wouldn't have chosen to exclude me from your life. Not even for an afternoon. Not even for just coffee. You don't do that to someone you see a future with." He stared at me, eyes, wide panic rising behind them like a tide. I continued, my voice gentle but unshakable. "That was a different life, Caleb, and I've made peace with the fact that it's over." A full second passed before I added the words that ended everything more completely than any breakup ever could. "I'm happy in the life I have now, and you're not in it." For a moment, he didn't move, didn't breathe. His expression crumpled not just from heartbreak, but from the dawning realization that his hold over me was gone. Completely. Permanently. He opened his mouth as if to speak, but nothing came out. He stepped back, one slow retreating motion, then another. He walked away. His shoulders were slumped, not in anger, but in defeat, the kind that comes when a door doesn't just close, but disappears entirely. Tessa shot me a sour look as she followed him out, but even that didn't land. Her glare slid right off me, unable to find anything to stick to. Noah exhaled low. Who was that? I lifted my glass, feeling a quiet, warm certainty settle into my bones. No one, I said, and I meant every syllable. The conversation resumed. The dartboard clattered again. Laughter rose around me. Life didn't pause for the past. It never had to. I was already living in the present. In the days after that encounter at the grizzly bear, I expected at least a ripple inside me, some faint aftershock, some echo of sadness or anger or even satisfaction. But nothing arrived. My emotional landscape stayed calm, still, and strangely bright, like a field after a storm where the grass glistens, but the air already smells clean. It wasn't triumph. It wasn't revenge. It was simply the natural absence of something that no longer held meaning. I didn't revisit the moment in my head the next morning. I didn't replay what he said. I didn't scrutinize my answers or wonder if I'd been too cold, too calm. I just went on with my day. I cleaned my kitchen, watered my plants, and opened the windows to let the sunlight fall across the living room floor. The rays warmed the wooden boards in a way that reminded me of the apartment I left behind, but this place felt different. This sunlight belonged to me alone. That was the quiet miracle of it all. I wasn't recovering from Caleb. I was simply returning to myself. Over the next few weeks, my life unfolded in small, deliberate moments. I went to weekend markets with Lena and Noah. I took long walks along the river after work. I started journaling again, something I hadn't done in years because the old apartment had never felt like a space where my thoughts had room to stretch. Here, they had an entire home. I bought a small white ceramic cup from a thrift shop. I filled it with soil and planted a succulent. It sat on my windowsill, growing slowly but steadily, reaching for the light in a calm, unhurried way. I liked it there. I liked myself here. One evening, about a month after the pub incident, I found myself sorting through a small box of old keepsakes, notes, ticket stubs, tiny objects that had accumulated over time. Not from Caleb, but from the years before him. Before I had shaped myself so tightly around someone else's needs. Before I had shrunk parts of my life to fit the spaces he left unfilled. There was a picture of me on a beach from 5 years ago. I was laughing at something off-camera sun in my hair, salt water drying on my skin. When I picked it up, it didn't feel like a remembrance of youth or an ache for the past. It felt like a promise. A reminder that the version of me who existed before the relationship wasn't gone. She had never been lost. She had simply been waiting for space. I placed the picture on my new bookshelf. A week later, I had dinner with my parents. My mother watched me carefully the entire night, not with suspicion, but with the soft attentiveness of someone who senses a shift even before you've spoken about it. When dessert arrived, she finally asked, "You seem lighter these days, happier. What changed?" I didn't tell her about Caleb, not because I wanted to hide him, but because he didn't need to exist in this conversation. The chapter was already closed. I chose peace, I told her simply. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. "You look like yourself again," she said. "It suits you." It wasn't until I drove home that night, windows cracked to let in the warm air, that her words fully sank in. I hadn't even realized how far I'd drifted from the woman I once was. How many small concessions had accumulated into something quietly suffocating. How easily one sentence, "You're not invited," had cut through everything I'd been ignoring. And how instantly I had recognized that was not something I could coexist with. 2 months after that, the seasons shifted. Summer turned into early autumn, the kind where leaves began to yellow at the edges, and the nights carried a sharper chill. I walked home from the grocery store one evening, under a soft gold sunset, the kind that makes even the ordinary world look cinematic. I didn't think about Caleb, not because I was avoiding him, but because he no longer occupied space. He was simply a man I used to know, framed by a moment of clarity that pushed me back toward my own life. At home, I put away my groceries, made tea, and sat by the window, watching the first hints of fall settle over the street. The succulent on my windowsill had grown 2 new leaves, small and pale green. I smiled. There was no dramatic epiphany, no sweeping emotional release, just a steady understanding I had saved myself at exactly the right time, in exactly the right way. The future felt like an open horizon, not defined by loss, not shaped by regret, and not burdened by the heaviness of what might have been. It felt honest, uncomplicated, filled with room. I wasn't the woman waiting to be chosen anymore. I was the woman who chose herself. And that was more powerful than any proposal, promise, or apology could ever be. Later that night, as I turned off the lights and walked to my bedroom, I glanced once more at the photo of me laughing on the beach. It no longer represented who I used to be. It represented who I had found again. My life wasn't something I needed to rebuild. It was something I had simply needed to return to. And now that I wasn't leaving it again.